Welcome to the Business After Hours, where the ties loosen, the suits relax, and we talk business without the boardroom. Grab your favorite drink, kick back, and let's dive into the world of business after hours.
Yo, yo, yo. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the Business After Hours podcast with Jared and Kevin. How you gentlemen doing today?
Living the dream.
Living the dream, even though it's a nightmare, maybe. As we were just discussing, huh?
Yes.
So, Kevin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you both. I am a podcaster, I am a coach, I am a speaker, and I am an entrepreneur. I've been a full-time podcaster since 2018. As of today, we have 1,775 episodes, I think, and we do an episode every day. So I get to do this for a living, which was quite literally my dream when I first started in 2017.
Awesome. Congrats. How's that been?
I appreciate it.
How's it been? How's that journey been?
Oh, brutal. Yeah, no, it's been the most challenging thing ever of all time. It looks really good and it looks really shiny now, but we didn't make money for the first couple years. There's just been so many things behind the scenes that you would just never see. Being in debt for the first few years, not being able to buy Christmas presents for my now wife but girlfriend at the time, car breaking down and not being able to get that fixed, couldn't pay car insurance, so that got sent to collections. Kind of the entrepreneurial journey that a lot of us, I think, go through. And I think that, I don't know, I think there was a piece of me that kind of expected it, which made it a little bit easier. Nobody ever told me this was going to be the easy way and I was going to be able to work less in the beginning. So I think I was more prepared than maybe other people might have been.
I feel that. Yeah.
So
obviously podcasting has been something that has been a rising category.
Yeah.
It used to be blogging. Now it's turned into podcasting. And it does seem, I'm going to sound a little hypocritical here because we're obviously doing a podcast, but it just seems like everybody and anybody can do a podcast. How much dedication does it take to make it full time though?
The truth is everyone and anyone can, because the barrier to entry is so low, right? You can literally start a podcast with your phone. You don't need a mic. You don't need a camera. Like, you can get it going that way. It's just like any other business, really. I mean, that's kind of what I tell people when they say, like, I want to be a full-time podcaster. I always say, number one, if you don't know about business, you're most likely not going to make it, because it's not about making money from your podcast. It's about using your podcast as exposure to then get creative with other ideas. So most people, I was telling Jared this before you came in, Jeff, I think you're 27 or 28 episodes in, and I said, you're already more successful than 90% of podcasts. 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 3. So if we just think of the statistics of that, it is nearly impossible to do the podcast thing full time as often as we get to do it and then build a business out of it. It is unreasonably challenging, but truthfully, it's the most fulfilling thing ever. So if you want to do it, give it everything you got, but it's most likely going to take more time, energy, effort, focus, and dedication than you imagine in the beginning.
What did you do prior to 2017?
So I didn't go to college.
Okay.
For me, it just didn't make sense. I don't like learning. Now I have a self-improvement company, but I didn't like learning at the time. So I started working at a gas station. That was my first job. I was a personal trainer. I was a truck driver. I was a forklift operator, on-call firefighter for a very short amount of time, construction. And then I ended up working in an industry called weatherization. So it was our job to go into buildings and make them more energy efficient. And since I was working on mostly state or government buildings, I was getting prevailing wage, which basically means the state dictates how much money you make. So I was making anywhere from $60 to $120 an hour doing that job, and I was convinced that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I'm a kid who is not supposed to be successful. I never felt smart, grew up without my dad, lower income, not a lot of opportunity. So I was convinced that was going to be the thing that I did for the rest of my life. And then I ended up sitting on the edge of a bed contemplating suicide a few years later, and that was kind of the pivot point to get us to what we're doing today.
Well, glad you're still with us.
I appreciate that.
So why didn't you quit? You know, you've been roughing it, like what made you keep going?
So a couple things. One, I have a wonderful, wonderful business partner. So I've never really had to do it alone. I did it alone for the first year, but when I left my job and started to do this full time, we partnered up. So I've always had someone there to endure the suffering with me, and that's super, super helpful. So I've never really felt alone. The second thing, and it's going to sound probably cliche, I genuinely didn't believe I could do it. I might come across as somebody who has a very high level of self-belief. That's just because I've done this many, many times, but I am somebody who has really dealt with self-worth and self-belief issues for most of my life. I had a thorough belief that if I could survive, it would be worth it. That was really the thing that kept me going. When I started this, I loved it. I fell in love with podcasting. And my ultimate goal was to figure out how to make this passion profitable. So for me, it was just a matter of if we could get to the place where I'm sustainable financially, and I would get to podcast every day, my life would be absolutely incredible. So for me, Jared, it was just about hanging on to the place where I could pay the bills. And now it's very hard. I mean, we do an episode every day, and I'm on a bunch of other podcasts and coaching calls and business meetings, but I can pay the bills. So it's way easier now because at least I have my basic human needs met. So one, I genuinely believed it would be worth it. Two, I can't imagine going back to anything else. I don't think I would ever be happy. I don't think I would ever be fulfilled. I would rather suffer for the rest of my life doing this than go try to find something that would ever replace the fulfillment and joy and happiness and impact I get to feel when I get to do this.
Yeah.
So how did you work up the nerve to jump to this full time, knowing that you're gonna have all these hurdles to go, to come?
Yeah, so I started the podcast in 2017. I fell in love with podcasting. The year before, I tried to make as much money as humanly possible in my job because I was convinced, and I think a lot of us fall victim to this, unfortunately, that if I make a boatload of money, I'm going to feel really good about me. I'm going to be super confident, and my self-worth's going to go through the roof, and I'm going to fix all my problems. I just need that 6-figure mark. That's what it is. 5 figures isn't enough, but when you get to 6, all of your problems go away. So I grinded my face off to make that money. I spent 10 months living on the road, sleeping in hotels every single week because our contracts were out of state. I got to the end of the year. I opened my final pay stub, and I remember my bank account was nice and I had financial certainty, but internally I didn't feel any different. I think I probably felt worse because I felt like I had wasted so much of my year grinding away for nothing. So I started the podcast after that, and then I was really struggling with my mental health. I wanted to stay home and podcast, but I had to pack my bags. I had to get in the work van. I had to drive 6 or 12 hours to the job site. It's almost impossible for me to hold down a relationship because I'm never home. And when I'm home, I'm sleeping.
Sure.
I am staying up for days on end, eating junk food every single day and not sleeping enough. So my mental health really took a turn for the worse. And that's the reason I ultimately left my job, because I genuinely thought if I stayed doing what I was doing, I would have ended up killing myself. It was it wasn't really courage. I think more than anything, it was self-preservation. And the weird thing is, when I left my job, my depression pretty much went away. I understand not everybody has that privilege because there's circumstances, right? I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have a family. I didn't have a car payment. But it wasn't really courage. It was more, what I'm doing really sucks. I know I can't do this for much longer. This podcast thing is right now is a convenient, fun hobby. How bad can it be? I mean, how bad could it be to try to grow this? It can't be as bad as what I'm doing now. So yeah, I think it was more out of necessity than choice. I don't know if I wanted to do it. I think I felt more that I had to do it than anything.
No, that's good. So how long did it take for you to become profitable? Is that pickle juice?
No, that's Jared said the same thing. It's electrolytes.
I thought of the same damn
I
thing.
mean, that's the same thing, right? Pickle juice.
Yeah, I guess it's the same. Yeah. It took us about 2 years, and not so. The big reason was when we started, I assumed that it was going to be kind of a bro podcast. I'm a tattooed bodybuilder who loves mixed martial arts. In my mind, it's just going to be a lot of bros listening, and we're going to talk about bro self-improvement. And when people started to share the content on social media, we started to notice a pattern that it was almost all women. Almost every single person that shared was a woman. So we were in this research and development kind of phase. I would DM them on social media and say, hey, thank you so very much for sharing. I appreciate it. I'd love to get to know you better to figure out what you're dealing with so we can make more aligned content. Are you open to jumping on a FaceTime call? And I had no products, no services. I wasn't selling anything. And I would just jump on the phone and just get to know these people and get to know their problems. And then we figured out, okay, this is what our audience tends to struggle with. So the first year and a half, it was genuinely just research and development, figuring out how to speak to the audience that we had captured, and really working on the character of, if we're going to be self-improvement guys and we're going to have a self-improvement company, we really have to make sure we're walking our talk. And I'm going to have to really work on my character to make sure that I can hold the responsibility of speaking to so many people. You know, that's eventually going to happen. And then I went broke. And then it was, okay, how do we make money? And then it made sense where we have a self-improvement podcast. The best way to make money logically for us was to coach people on self-improvement. So I went to the people that I had talked to and said, hey, I'm not going to charge for this. I'm just going to beta test this coaching thing. I found 5 people, asked them if they wanted free coaching for 2 months. They all said yes. I coached them all for free for 2 months. And at the end of 2 months, everybody said they wanted to continue doing it. And then I started making $50 per call. And that was the beginning of how this thing got monetized.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's all about self-improvement just as a person or as business or like all of the above, everything?
Yeah, our brand is holistic self-improvement, level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. And that's why it's so challenging, because you're working on yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You're trying to make your relationship with yourself and the people around you so positive, and you're trying to figure out how to make, save, invest money in this crazy world that we live in so your future can be as bright as humanly possible.
Yeah.
So how'd you get the views? You know, how did you get people starting to come to your YouTube, your podcasts,
In the very beginning, we had a very different approach where we were very guest heavy. Now we do 7 solo episodes a week. We don't have guests anymore. We haven't had guests in years. In the beginning, it was, all right, let's figure out who are the big players in our industry, and let's just go above and beyond to try to get them on, whatever that means. So the first big guest I think we ever really got was Lori Harder, and Lori Harder is big in our industry. She ended up coming to do an event in Boston. Alan and I went, and I think there was only 3 guys there and like 300 women, so we were 2 of the 3 guys. Her husband, Chris Harder, was there. We met him in person and asked him to come on. And then it kind of became this, when you get one big guest on, it's very easy to name drop. When you reach out to someone, you say, we've had this person on and we've had this person on. And if that big guest knows those other people, they might reach out and ask them, or that might just be enough credibility to get you vouched for. So that was one way, is we tried to go above and beyond. We would travel to guests. When guests came to Massachusetts, we would rent hotel rooms and literally podcast in person and bring all of our equipment. So yeah, we really went above and beyond with that. But this is the other thing. 2017, 2018, 2019 were different times.
Yeah, it's very true.
That's a big piece of it, is there was no pod match. There was no matchmaker. There weren't platforms for guests to get on podcast. It was really, how well can you craft your message that you're sending to these people on social media? How well can you use the credibility that you already have? And how can you then use that to build momentum? So that was a really big piece of it in the beginning. The other thing that we've been really, really focused on, and I think this crosses the chasm for all businesses, is we are very focused on doing unscalable but valuable things. And we always have been. So even that example that I used in the beginning where I would literally give my phone number to people, those people became listeners that stuck with us for years and years and years and years. And those are the people that referred us. So the biggest way that we got views and listens was listeners referring us. And that became such a big piece of it for us. So that was really big. And social media was different back then too. So social media helped a lot, not in terms of followers, but the engagement was different and we were having a lot of one-on-one conversations with people. So yeah, those things, and then community. We've had a really good community since the beginning, but it takes a lot of time to grow a community. There's very little ROI in the short run, but we understood that. Community is not about money for us. Community is not about conversion. Community is about value. So that's a big way that's helped us too.
No, I agree. Definitely.
Yeah.
So what's your structure? Is it podcast like number one for revenue, coaching?
Yeah. So this is where things get wonky. Technically speaking, we haven't made a dime from the podcast directly. So we don't do ads, we don't do sponsorships, we don't do affiliates. Not interested, we'll never do them. Just not our
Sure.
vision. Every dollar we have made has come from speaking, coaching, products, or services. So the podcast is the brand builder. And you can find us everywhere. And when you search us, you'll find us. And awesome, that's the brand. The number one revenue stream has been coaching for sure. That's probably 75% of our revenue. Speaking is probably 5%. Products and services or products are probably like 5%. And then there's probably like some miscellaneous stuff. So most of it is coaching, but things have happened over the last 7 years where I didn't necessarily expect them to happen. So we started doing self-improvement coaching with our audience. And eventually, when we got to 400, 500, 600 episodes, people started reaching out and asking me for podcast advice. Like, how did you guys get to 600 episodes or 700 episodes? And I would explain kind of the process. Then people started asking me about audio editing and video editing. And I'd kind of try to explain that process as well as I could. And then eventually someone reached out and said, hey, I want you to produce my podcast. And I remember thinking, I have no idea how to do that. I have no idea what that means. I've done ours, but it's easy when it's yours. You don't overthink it. You just do it. So then I had that start, and then we opened a new branch, and now we work with 45 podcasts right now between production and coaching. So that's a piece of it. And then eventually some of those clients said, hey, can you take care of my social media so I can focus on other stuff? It's like, yeah, okay. So then now we have like a dozen social media clients. And then some were asking for web services. So it's like, all right, we should probably have a kind of a web branch. So yeah, ultimately it became, right now we probably have 5 or 6 revenue sources within the business, but every single one was created on what problem have we solved? How did we create procedures and SOPs and systematize it? And where is the demand coming from? And then now those all are very, very successful businesses within the business. It's this weird thing that you never see from the outside looking in, but there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on your coaching, are you more for podcasters then?
I am now. Yeah, I work with 99.9% of the people I work with are podcasters, speakers, or coaches. And then my business partner works with business owners and our community. And then we have group coaching, which is our community. But yeah, I'm really trying to lean into podcast coaching, more speaking, more traveling to speak, that type of stuff. It takes time to figure out what you really want to do. I didn't think I wanted to coach. In the beginning, I hated it. I remember telling Alan, this coaching thing kind of sucks. I don't think I want to do it. Then when I started podcast coaching, I was like, oh, never mind. It was just the brand of coaching that I was doing. I love talking about podcasting, clearly. So that is the majority of what I do. And now I speak on that. I speak on speaking. I speak on building the business around the podcast. Those are kind of the big pillars now.
No, that's good. Now, if a podcaster's listening and obviously you're not the only podcaster coach, I would imagine.
No.
What would a podcaster person looking for a coach might be like? What would be like, I guess, your ideal client, and what would they be looking for as well?
Yeah, usually our ideal client is an entrepreneur who understands that they're going to have to pay someone to do it because their time is more valuable elsewhere, in sales, in one-on-one conversations, in ultimately revenue generating activities. That's really our ideal client. It's somebody who has the money to invest in it. And our prices are very, very affordable. I mean, our cheapest package starts at $247 a month. So like our prices are super sustainable. It's really that. Somebody who knows, look, I know I'm going to have to pay someone to do it. I would rather just send it to one team that takes care of all the audio and all the video and the YouTube and the social media stuff, and not have to go waste time on Upwork or Fiverr trying to sift through all of the messages and figure out who is quality. And also somebody who wants to know more about podcasting. I think one of the differences between us and your average podcast production company is I'm in the trenches every day. I am a podcaster who has 2,800 episodes of experience. I've spoken a ton, too much. So I can help these clients be better speakers, be better podcasters, turn it into a business. A lot of production companies just produce. We have a production company, and I also coach dozens and dozens of podcasters as well. So somebody who's looking for knowledge as much as they're looking for something that is a done-for-you service, I would say is an ideal client.
Now, for those that are, same topic, looking to start a podcast, what's it take for production? Because I'm they hear you saying producing the show and what all goes into something like that, just to kind of prepare somebody.
I mean, if you're starting, I literally started with a client recently who they're just like a consulting client. And they said, what do I have to do to get started? And I said, well, what's your budget? And they said, as low as humanly possible. And I said, awesome. I would buy a tripod. I would set up your phone, and I would just start recording your episodes. Record the videos, put them up on YouTube, cut the audio, and upload that to the podcast platforms. You don't necessarily have to have an intro. You don't necessarily have to have an outro. You don't have to have a branded video for YouTube. You just got to get going. So for most people, they overthink the beginning and they just wait for perfection, and it just never happens.
Sure.
Our clients are looking more for like, a cold open and music and things cut a certain way and social media content to look a certain way, but that's just a higher degree. The average person who wants to do a podcast, if you learn a little bit about audio editing, that's a really good place to start. There is a ton of free platforms. You can use Audacity. Audacity's a really good one. Adobe Audition is paid. It's a little bit more expensive, but that's pretty much the basis of it. You don't need to have to worry about doing intros and outros and all that stuff. In the beginning, you just have to get familiar with most likely audio editing. And then I think a lot of people think that setting up a podcast is super challenging because you have to get it on Apple and Spotify and all that.
Right.
If you sign up to the right host, they basically do it for you. So we use Buzzsprout. I have no affiliation. We've just used them for a long time. When you create your podcast, there's a little button that says directories, and you just click a button and it'll send you to Apple and it'll send you to Spotify. And when you're ready to upload an episode, you upload your episode to the host and then it gets sent out to all the other platforms. So It's not like you have to upload it natively every single time. So yeah, I would say it's way easier than you think, and you can start with whatever equipment you have. Just understand that there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve if you're focused on audio editing. Video editing is a whole nother monster, but a lot of these platforms now are making it way easier. We're using StreamYard right now as we record this.
Correct.
They're up-leveling a lot of their options, and I'm sure pretty soon they'll probably have like a built-in video editor. Canva, you can edit video in Canva now, so that's something worth testing. I think, Jeff, it's mostly about being creative and figuring out, look, let me try this. I learned audio editing and I learned video editing in Adobe Premiere, which is like a really challenging platform to learn in, but there was nothing else at the time, and that's paid off for us. So yeah, get creative with it.
Yeah, what do you say to those that feel like, I want to do it, but I feel like podcasts are oversaturated?
I believe the stat is there's been roughly 5 million podcasts started, and only 400,000 of them are still in production on a weekly basis, I believe. It might be monthly. I think the stat is like 400,000 have produced an episode in the last month. It's not oversaturated. No, it's I think there's 33 million YouTube channels. YouTube is far more saturated than the podcast space is. And ultimately, if you do it, I'm a really good shining example of this. If you just do it for longer than everyone else, you focus on getting a little bit better every time, and you never get to the place where you say, that's good enough, you're going to make it further than most people. If I quit 100 episodes in, we wouldn't be talking. It's just,
right.
And we wouldn't have made a single dollar. And we would have said, I tried that podcast thing, but it wasn't for me. It wasn't for me.
Sure.
If you get in with a mindset of, I'm going to start a podcast because it's the sexy thing to do, and I think it's the easiest path to monetization, I would say you're probably going to lose. If you get in with the understanding that I'm going to work on speaking, I'm going to learn a ton about myself, I'm going to use the knowledge that I have of business and put it into effect here, I'm going to use it to network and meet people, I'm going to create a ton of content, and I'm in it for 3 years, I would put money on you achieving some level of result. So definitely not oversaturated. If anything, the industry is looking for more quality content creators. And if that's you, there's no reason you can't start now.
Right. Jared, you got anything?
I agree that starting the podcast is probably the hardest thing to do. I know with us in this podcast, I think that was the hardest thing was, all right, let's just pick a date to run it and we'll go from there. And we've kind of, learned a lot on the way. Jeff's done other podcasts before, but myself, this is the first one. So I think just getting out there and doing it is important.
What's been your biggest surprise, Jared, with a podcast? Like what is the thing that you now are like, I cannot believe I didn't think that was going to happen?
I think just the overall podcast, doing it all, because I didn't have a clue on where to go, how to find guests. I finally found out, Matchmaker, and so I just think it was just keeping going,
Yeah.
really.
Well, that's the cream always rises to the top eventually. And the other it's so hard to explain because so I gave a speech recently in Toronto with Evan Carmichael. I don't know if you know Evan, but he's a big guy on YouTube in our space, 4 million subs. He's like the YouTube guy. That came from us interviewing him like 4 years ago. We prepped a ton. I used to do like 3 hours of prep for each interview back in the day. And he said, I'm going to give you guys 20 minutes. I'm going on tour. I'm doing a bunch of podcasts. I'm saying yes to everyone. He got 20 minutes. So we prepare to do a 20-minute episode with him, and we get to 19 minutes, and I'm the host, so I say, Ev, thank you so much for joining us. I want to make sure you get to your next meeting on time. Anything you want to leave the audience with? And he says, no, I want to stay with you guys. Let's keep going. So he gave us an hour. That hour led to him coaching us for free. That coaching for free ended up us being friends. And then us being friends ended up him messaging me a couple months ago saying, hey, I have my high-ticket in-person mastermind in Toronto. I want you to come speak at it. That was all from a podcast interview. That's the thing that's really hard to explain. If you get good at the craft, I've been offered speaking gigs, and that's not something we market. That's not something we promote, but I've been paid to speak. Well, that's because of the podcast. If you focus on the craft, if you focus on getting good at speaking, if you focus on getting good at influence, if you focus on getting good at interviewing, opportunities come up that you would never have if you didn't have the podcast.
Sure.
So it's really hard to track, where did this come from? Well, it came from the podcast, but what was the piece of the podcast that it came from? It's really hard to decode that later in time, but if it wouldn't have existed without the podcast, I always say it is the podcast creation, right? None of this would happen without the podcast. The podcast is the thing that creates the success.
So it sounds
I
like
agree.
the podcast was started intentionally, but the coaching kind of started by accident almost.
Yeah. It started as, again, a lot of it's been necessity. I needed to learn how to make money. And then it was like, all right, mindset coaching is the way to do it. And then it was, people are literally saying, hey, you should produce podcasts. I'm going to connect you with someone. And in the beginning, the first client we ever got, I went to see him in person like 4 times. He was the CEO of a financial firm. So I put on my finest khakis and oversized button-up shirt because I didn't have any, it's not like I have nice clothes. I go to his place of work and he comes down in his suit and he's asking me all these questions that I don't know the answers to, but I'm trying to pretend like I know what I'm talking about because I know some stuff. So I went and saw him 4 times. And then on the 4th time, he's like, how much does it cost? Like, let's do this. And I didn't know. I was like, I don't know, it's $1,500 a month and it's $1,000 to start. And he's like, awesome. Venmo, check, cash, what do you take? Whatever, dude. Whatever you got, I will take. I will take an IOU if that's what it takes. That was the very beginning, and that was the proof of concept. And then I made a ton of mistakes after that. I thought everybody was going to pay $1,500 a month. No, most people can't afford $1,500 a month. So, okay, that changed. So yeah, it was very much, a lot of the business opportunities that we have created have been because we systematized it. People saw the results of the system, and then they asked us how we did it. And that's still my sales strategy is add more value than anybody else possibly can, give as much away for free as humanly possible, and eventually, when somebody is ready, they will ask what it takes to work together. That's like my sales philosophy in a nutshell. I would much rather somebody say no to me and be aligned than say yes and regret it. I don't want somebody to give me money and regret it. And a lot of people don't talk about that. They talk about this is how you get the client. They don't talk about how you keep the client and how you keep the relationship. They leave that part out conveniently.
Right.
That's a very big thing for us is we're such a community-focused business that the way a client leaves is just as important as everything that happens before it. I am a huge proponent of being able to text an ex-client and check in on them and have a very good aligned relationship. That is something that is super, super important to us. And it's one of the ways or one of the reasons we do the business in the ways that we do.
So on your coaching, it didn't obviously start out coaching podcasters, right?
No, it was mindset, peak performance, relationship kind of. I wasn't branding myself as a relationship coach because I was single. I knew fundamentals and some things made sense to me that I guess it was easier for me to see than the other people. But yeah, it was very much, our podcast used to be called the Hyper Conscious Podcast. Acutely aware, you know why everything is going on in your brain the way it is. So I would essentially coach people on self-awareness. And that was the first, I mean, we didn't make any money for the first 2 years. I probably did that for like a year. And then the podcast coaching and production started.
Right. So the more coaching that you did prior to coaching podcasts, did you see a big stigma with the mental illnesses as you were coaching?
Not as much as you'd expect because most of the people I worked with were women. And I think women have always been kind of more open to having vulnerable conversations than men. Not to blanket statement that, but
No,
it's statistically true.
Right?
Yeah.
And that was my experience. One of my girlfriends told me I should go to therapy, and I was like, "Come on, no, look at me, I'm fine, strong, gym, man."
Therapy,
and eventually,
what's that?
right, and eventually I went, and it was wonderful. So, no, I think if anything, one of our unique advantages was since we were talking mostly to women, they were just surprised that we actually cared enough to have the deep conversations.
Wow.
And I think it really made them feel safe. You have two very, very, very physical, consistent, disciplined men running this business, and nobody's going to get bullied in my community. Not going to happen, because you're not going to bully me. So that's always been the thing, is like, you're safe here. I know for a lot of people, the hardest thing in the world for them to be is themselves. In our community, that's all I want you to be. I just want you to be you, because you give me the permission to be me. So
Sure.
it wasn't really a lot of that. The thing that really surprised me, Jeff, was how many toxic relationships I recognized. Many of the people that I would coach were in either very apparent or extremely undercover toxic relationships. So very apparent, where their partners would just be outright disrespectful and negative.
Wow.
Undercover, where they would be, one of the partner would be super insecure. So they would be very, very gently trying to hold the person back from becoming more. There's this weird thing where a lot of the partners of the people that listen to us don't like us that much, especially if they're insecure. We've noticed that. We've noticed that because,
that.
right? I want your partner to be aligned, fulfilled, self-love, self-worth, self-belief. If you like the other version because it makes you feel a certain way, and you're able to be dominant, and you're able to have an ego, and you're able to be arrogant, you're probably not going to like us very much. And we've seen some of that, and that's been an unfortunate byproduct, but I think it's a suggestion of progress, which is That's what we're after.
Yeah. Gets people talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Now I been sensing an accent. Where are you from?
I don't know if there is an accent. I grew up like an hour outside of Boston. I have been working diligently, Jeff, on getting rid of that so people don't think I am a masshole.
I heard the a boot.
We have a bunch of Canadians on our team, so that's probably maybe the Canadian is coming out in me as well.
Okay, is that where you're currently located in Mass?
No, I live in New Hampshire now.
Oh, okay.
But close enough, right? It's
all
all
right.
the same.
Same thing, right? Same thing.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. I can get to Massachusetts in 15 minutes, so it's close enough.
Okay. Yeah, might as well be the same thing then.
Yeah.
So what has been your biggest, I guess, failure, fuck up? Like what would you say doing this ride? What was your biggest fuck up, and how did you move forward?
Man, a couple of them. One, we went to, where were we? Scottsdale, Arizona, for an event. We had a mentor at the time, more my business partner's mentor than I, but he was a multi-millionaire, very successful in the real estate space, invited us to interview him in his mansion in Scottsdale. And when we flew home a couple of weeks later, he said, "Kev, I'd want to talk to you about podcasting. I want to start a podcast." And I was like, all right, cool, awesome. So we do the talk. I send him the packages. And I said, what you're looking for is $1,500 a month. And you got it. You're multi-million. $1,500 is nothing for you. And he said, I'll give you $1,000 a month, but I'll pay you for 3 months in advance. And I'll also give you a plug on the podcast. So I will say this podcast is being produced by you guys, and I'm going to be talking to some very successful people. And I said, no, $1,500 or nothing. And he took the nothing. And we lost a massive, massive opportunity to work with this individual. And that was a lesson for me on many things. One lesson was, just because people have more money does not mean they're willing to spend more money. The reason he got to financial freedom is because he is very stringent and diligent with where his money is going. So that was a huge one for me.
Was that early on?
That was my second potential client ever.
Wow.
So that was a podcast client.
Yeah. So who knows where you would have been.
Yeah. And my business partner said this to me recently. He said, I wonder if he was just trying to teach you a lesson. I wonder if he was so focused on just teaching you a lesson that he was like, Kev, this is going to suck for Kev in the business right now, but they'll take this and run with it. I don't know, but it definitely, it changed a lot for me. I think I got arrogant. I think I was a little arrogant thinking, oh, I just got a $1,500 a month client. You can pay the same. That was an important lesson. The other thing, I mean, we've lost a lot of money doing live events. Live events are so challenging to do. So incredibly challenging, especially as a global business and brand. We have listeners in 170 countries, not necessarily where we live, and we're not necessarily at the place where people are going to fly across the country to come to one of our events. We've had people do it, but that has been a very, very humbling experience, is spending $7,000 on an event and barely breaking even. That has happened a handful of times. So that has been a very, very humbling experience. I don't know if I would say it's a fuck up because we got content and,
Sure.
and we learned a lot and we got to meet people, but maybe we should have stopped after the first one. I would say we probably shouldn't have kept going, pumping money into it.
Right.
You think things are going to change year over year. It's like we did this last year. This year it'll be more successful. Not everything works that way. So those are a couple big ones. I mean, we interviewed, I don't know if you know Dean Graziosi, but we interviewed Dean Graziosi, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It was the first time that we had used this camera with our capture card as a webcam. And it looked like it was being filmed on a potato. It was absolutely garbage. And at the time, it was the biggest guest we ever had. And we had to work so hard in that interview for him to even take us remotely seriously because the tech was so bad. So that's a huge mess up. I haven't hit record on interviews before. All of those mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, yeah. But I would say the first client and then live events are probably two of the bigger, more impactful ones.
So did he ever start a podcast?
Nope.
So maybe it was a test.
That's given me solace, as I always tell Alan, like, well, he still doesn't have a podcast, so maybe he was never going to do it. I mean, that helps me sleep at night, Jeff, you know?
You thought about reaching back out?
Yeah.
I did several times. He never responded.
Oh,
No,
never
wow.
responded.
I broke it. I messed it up. I messed up the relationship.
Nah.
That was on me.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I guess it goes to show you. I mean, like at the end of the day, you don't know what opportunities presented in front of you, and this is why I even try to tell my kids when they go to sell something, and you always get the low ball offers, and I'm like, how many offers did you have before? None. So you got to work the deal that you got now, because you don't know if and when the next deal comes along, and if it's going to be better or worse, or so. Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of goes along the same thing. Like you had a deal presented in front of you.
I messed up. I'm glad I learned that lesson, because now a lot of the clients I work with will be like, yeah, I worked with a coach and they're telling me I should do like a $10,000 course. It's like, no, you shouldn't. I know you shouldn't. You don't have any demand. You don't have any credibility. Nobody is going to pay you $10,000 for this.
Right.
Why would they? So the way I always work with clients is I don't want you to charge what you want to charge. I want you to charge what the market will bear. That's the way to start, because then we build momentum and we get testimonials and we get credibility and we learn lessons. But that comes from me making that mistake in the beginning. I'm glad I made that mistake, because now I can help other people avoid making that same mistake. And I think we're in this weird, entitled sales place where people think that if you don't charge high ticket, you're not successful, or I don't know. I don't know what the stigma behind that
I feel
is.
like too, I feel like some business coaches and whatnot and business people have, like, if you have a price here, don't devalue it by just selling it to one person. So I think that's obviously ingrained in a lot of us, especially those of us that have done sales, is like you don't want to undercut. So I see where you were coming from, because at the end of the day, you set your price point here. Well, you can't go into Walmart and negotiate down. You can't go into several places and negotiate down from the price point. So I get where your mindset was coming from, because it makes sense. Because you're like, hey, this is my price point. You either meet it or you don't. And if you don't move on, then we'll move on.
It was ego, though, I think. It was because it wasn't like, well, if we do it at 1,500, the margin will be X. And then we have a little movement. For me, I didn't even think about that. It was
Oh,
like,
okay.
this is,
I got
yeah,
you.
no, Jeff, you're giving me a lot of credit and I appreciate it. I do. I appreciate it.
Oh,
But
because that would be my my line of thinking. So
Yes.
I get it.
I'm willing to bet at that point you were way more seasoned than I was in the sales arena. So I was just trying to figure it out at that point. So it was arrogance. It was, look, somebody else is paying it. You got more money than he does. Why don't you just kick us the money? What's the big deal? Let's do it. Let's do business.
I can totally understand that too.
Now, that's crazy to argue $500 when you have the money.
Well, I understand now though, right? It's like,
yeah.
when you start hiring people, it's like the opposite. It's like, okay, this is how much you want. This is kind of what our budget is. Can we maybe meet somewhere in the middle? What can we do to make this a win-win? Sometimes you got to be on the opposite side of the coin to see how wrong you were on the other side. But yeah, lessons. That's all business lessons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sucks you can't reach out to them and find out why.
One day, Jared, I think if I keep doing this, maybe the next 15 years, maybe it'll happen. You know, one of these days he'll see me.
I hope
Me
it
too.
does.
And I will give him a thank you. I'll say, hey, thank you so much for teaching me that lesson early on. That has saved me and helped me make hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I appreciate that as much as it sucked, and I probably villainized you when it happened.
Oh, probably. Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of natural, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
Especially a guy of that economic stature, you know, that wealthy, then, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, it was like a two months paid up front for a month free kind of deal. And why does a multi-millionaire need extra $1,500 really?
I've learned that though. I mean, since then I've worked with like very, very, very successful people, and some of the most successful people I have worked with have been the hardest ones to get. They're the ones that are they're haggling away. What if I give you like 4 months in advance? Like, can that affect the price? Yeah, of course, sure. Let me see what I can do. Let me run the
Always
numbers.
haggling. And you know, like it does feel like, and this probably is part of your coaching too, I would imagine, but I feel like most very successful financial success, I don't want to make it just seem like making money is all success, but that have a ton of money, they got a whole different mindset of life. Like, they don't look at like problems as like a bad thing, like us little folk down here do. They look at it as more of an opportunity to grow, or an opportunity to improve, or something, where we look at it as like a downfall, that their whole mindset is just completely different.
Most of them are very, very, very dialed in. Just everything is dialed in. And yeah, it's almost like I don't really care about the problem. I more care about the solution than anything. That's been. But the other thing that's really helped in business is a lot of the clients that we've been working with recently just say, look, I don't want to work with a bunch of different people. I would rather have one team that does all of this stuff, because they're thinking of efficiency. Well, if I have to message 5 people or email 5 people to get 5 different things done, that's going to take however long. But what if I could just email one person to get all 5 things done?
Right.
So that's been a convenient thing that's been helpful for us. It's been very beneficial to us and the clients. But I didn't expect that either. I didn't think we were going to have like package deals where you get all this stuff done. Who knows, right? But now we do.
Now, when you started, did you start solo, or did you start with your business partner that's, I'm assuming, your co-host? Or
in 2017, I started by myself. And then in 2018, we partnered up, and then we have done every single episode together since then. And I was telling Jared this before you got in, Jeff. He's the numbers guy. He's an electrical and computer engineer with a master's in business, and he's a genius. I am very grateful that I have a business partner who is really good at the things that I wasn't. I was better at the emotional intelligence, people skills, and creative. So yeah, he has been with me, and I have been with him since 2018, and we've done essentially almost every single episode together, other than maybe like 20.
Now, on your coaching, is there a common theme that you find that like seems to be something that like you tack in on immediately from like almost every client? Is there a common like mental issue that and I don't want to say mental illness, but like just like a frame of mind or mindset that like, okay, if you correct that, is that like is there a common one that you see?
I would say the most common one is an unfortunate one that a lot of people start this because they think it's the easy route. That's the most common thing is the first call I have with someone, I say, on a scale of 0 to 10, how much time, energy, effort, focus, and money are you willing to put into this? And the answer pretty much dictates the level of success. So my job as a coach in the beginning is to help somebody set aligned, accurate expectations.
Sure.
That's really all it is. When I did a bodybuilding show in 2016, I think, my coach told me something that I'll never forget. He said, Kev, and this is the first time we ever talked. He said, Kev, if you want to win the show, you will suffer more than everybody else does. Are you in or are you out? And I was like, shit, okay, I'm in. I don't know what that means yet,
right?
But I'm in. And eventually I figured out what that meant. But imagine if he said to me, Kev, this might be a little bit challenging. At times you're going to want to quit. But if you continue doing it and you kind of push yourself, you'll probably get good results. Not a chance. I would get stomped. I would have got stomped by all these other people who are doing 2-a-days. I'm not that extreme with clients, but I have told so many clients, I don't think this is for you. I just don't think this is for you. I don't want to keep taking your money when you're not going to do the things that you need to be doing. I don't think this is for you. I think you need more certainty and I think you should go get a job. That's like a common conversation I have.
Sure.
I just want to see people win. If it's not with me, that's fine. If it's not in the podcast space, that's fine. But I think the most common thing is it's just misaligned expectations from whatever it is, social media, ads, other coaches, whatever. That's the most common one that I've seen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jared, you got anything or?
It's been great having Kevin on. Provided a lot of information.
Appreciate it.
So definitely think the viewers are going to enjoy it.
Can you give us, our viewers, a little bit of encouragement? Because, it's tough times out here in America these days. And
yeah,
a lot of struggling going on. So,
yeah, it is. It's challenging. I would say focus on what you can control. There is so much going on in the world right now, and it's overwhelming. And if you log on to social media, you watch the news, whatever it is, you're getting a ton of input into your brain. And a lot of that stuff, you're just not able to influence that much. I would say really, really hone in and focus on the stuff closest to you that you can influence. And as a self-improvement guy, that starts with you. So even if it's just, look, right now I feel like I'm in a bit of rut. What can I do? Wake up tomorrow and track your finances. Start there if you're not doing it. Tonight before you go to bed, play the gratitude game with your partner. What's one thing you're grateful for about your partner? What's one thing that they're grateful for about you? If you don't have a partner, you're riding solo, play the gratitude game with yourself. And then tomorrow when you wake up, when that alarm goes off and you don't want to get up, you want to stay in bed, I know, I feel you. Get your butt out of bed, go for a 30-minute walk, go to the gym for 30 minutes, do your meditation, do your yoga, whatever it is, and move your body. One thing under health, one thing under wealth, one thing under love. That stuff adds up. That adds up. I started with 3 habits a day in 2018, and now I track like 26 or something. You don't have to ever do that. But it all started with 1. And now my life, my love, my health, and my wealth have all increased. And there's no reason yours can't. But it's just that. Start small, habitualize that stuff, and a year from today, things are going to look different for sure.
Awesome. Great. So I got you at nextleveluniverse.com.
Yes, sir.
And then I've got your LinkedIn here. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure. That's my name. I don't know if the numbers make any sense, but I dig it.
I think it was probably just copy and paste from the URL, I imagine.
It's all good. I appreciate it.
So we will hyperlink both of his links into the description when it's there. What's the best way to contact you? Is it through LinkedIn or through your website?
I would probably say just email kevin@nextleveluniverse.com. I am definitely not an intellectual, so LinkedIn is probably not my biggest platform. I check my messages, but you could shoot me an email. I do my own emails.
Okay. Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Jared, you got anything else?
No, it was great having you on again, Kevin. Appreciate the openness and the willing to talk about some things that us men don't like to share sometimes.
I
Right.
appreciate that. That's the
Well,
goal. That's always the goal.
Yes, sir. Well, Kevin, we wish you nothing but best of success with your podcast and your coaching business.
Thank you.
Definitely will subscribe and tune in as well.
I appreciate it. Likewise, sending the love back. I'll see you in 200 episodes.
Yes, sir.
Hopefully.
All right.
Welcome to the Business After Hours, where the ties loosen, the suit relax, and we talk business without the boardroom. Grab your favorite drink, kick back, and let's dive into the world of business after hours.